the thing I want to bring up here is like, with the message, with the brand, with everything you're doing, how do you make sure it's resonating with people? Like, obviously you can put up things, but no one's looking at a job seeker site right now, right? So you could endlessly update. And that's the next piece, because literally I'll have people who update their resume 30 times and I'm like, have you sent one out yet? Like, it's like you're on the 5th version of your portfolio, but no one knows who you are. How do you actually go from like, all right, I've put myself out there, now I got to see what people are saying about what I've put out there, right? How do you get yourself in front of people? Because a lot of what we're talking about is visibility, right? We're trying to increase people's visibility, and maybe you do it in individual conversations. Maybe you go all the way to building a website and a brand, but how do you show up? How do you make yourself visible in all these different ways?
Absolutely. And I think a piece of this, it's really simple that a lot of people forget about, because we think like, if I want to build a personal brand, I have to be on all of the platforms all of the time. And it's the same thing with like not trying to pigeonhole myself. Feel like I need to make sure everyone can see me. But if nobody who's going to hire you is on like Instagram and Facebook, and everyone, like, you need to think first. So this brings me to the point that you need to figure out, first of all, where are the people that you want to see you hanging out? And that could be, you know, a social media platform. That could also be in-person meetups. That could be stuff that's happening locally. You know, who knows what's happening with COVID right now. But I think that that's what I would encourage people to think about, because what gets us into that, like, I'm constantly refining. I'm constantly like, I have the best looking portfolio ever and nobody has ever seen it. It's because we overwhelm ourselves with the idea that we need to be everywhere. When in reality, especially for a goal like getting a new job, we need to figure out where are the potential employers, where are the people who will be reading our resume, where are they? And then where are the people who would want to be checking out what I have to say? And then really it's a matter of showing up repeatedly. Sorry.
You're good.
The music of New York City in the background, music of Brooklyn, New York in the background here. But I think that, and this is something that I talk about with my clients a lot too, where when it comes to marketing themselves, they overwhelm themselves thinking they need to be everywhere when they don't. They feel like they always have to be super smart and on all the time when they don't. Some of the content's going to be throwaway. That's okay. But what matters is that you're showing up and you're consistently putting yourself out there in public. That's the key. And a lot of the reasons why people will change their resume 50 times, change their portfolio 500 times, is that they're like, well, it has to be perfect before anyone can see it. And the truth is, no, it does not. No, it does not at all. That's the thing. And to your point, you come up with all these different iterations of a site that nobody saw. And at the end of the day, does it matter? No. Because also your idea of perfection and something being quote unquote finished is probably very different from the casual observer who's checking out your stuff. So take a little pressure off yourself, y'all. And also the idea that we have about this all or nothing, everything, like I can't even say what I want to my coach because then I won't get this job. I can't put an idea out there because what if someone disagrees? I often find what's helpful to get over that fear, because it's imposter syndrome, it's insecurity, it's a fear of being vulnerable, it's all these things. I always remind my clients, because it's a harsh truth, but it's true. Nobody thinks about you as much as you think about yourself. Like, you're not tattooing something in blood on your forehead just because you shut up and posted one thing. And so once you kind of realize that this is a game of consistently showing up, this is a game of momentum, this is a game of building and of growth, then it's a lot less scary to show up and start trying to talk about things consistently, because you know nothing is permanent. Everything can change. If you have a small audience, even better, because that gives you an option to make mistakes and then change them if you need to. But does that answer your question? I realize I got on a little bit of a
no, I love it, because, and it's so true. Like, I actually had this moment years ago. I was hanging out with a buddy at a networking event, and they said to me, you know, I think you're pretty forgettable at these networking events. And I was like,
ouch,
damn. Like, but we were like those kinds of friends. We were very honest with each other. And he's a very flashy, like, wear a colorful, you know, jacket kind of guy.
Too. Yeah.
And like, and it like made me want to be a different way. And then after a few years of trying to be that other way, I went back to just being not memorable, because I was like, it's actually a superpower. I get to have multiple
Yeah.
first impressions. And like, there are
There
some
we go.
circumstances
Yeah.
where I was like, this is actually really helpful. And
Yeah.
it just showed me how difficult it is to be remembered. Like sometimes, like, and
Yeah.
it's like on the one hand, no one's paying attention to you as much as you're paying attention to you, right? You think you said something stupid, but the person at the party was just thinking about how they said something stupid. But the other thing is like,
Everyone has anxiety. It's 2021.
exactly.
Come on. Yeah.
And like Coca-Cola still advertises everywhere because they know if they stop, you will stop buying it because you'll forget.
Yep.
And they've been around forever. Like, and so it really reminds me, like, I used to have panic attacks going into networking events thinking everyone here is going to remember me for the worst thing I do tonight. And then I hit a point where I'm like, you kind of have to beat someone over the head for them to remember you. And that is a power. It's a power in one hand because you can test a lot of things out.
Yes, exactly.
But it's a struggle on the other hand, because then you're like, well, how do I get remembered?
Yeah.
And that becomes the back and forth. And that's where the brand can really thrive. And one of the things I'm curious about in your perspective, because people do sort of feel invisible during the job search. And it's made even more so visceral because you apply to job boards and you hear nothing back, and it can be really deadening.
Rejection is tough. Yeah.
Yeah. And the question I get asked all the time, and this is maybe the more controversial question that I always laugh when I hear it, it's like, how honest should I be about myself? And this is where I find it so interesting, because brands are not being honest. When they put up a job listing, it's not real. Like, it's 60% maybe.
Yep.
And like, and I always say, who has been hired for something? You get to the job and they go, actually, we're doing something completely different. This is your job now. And you're like, what? And so people are like, well, why do I have to be so honest? And I think what they really mean is like oversharing too much of their insecurities.
Exactly.
It's like, don't do that. But it's like, where is that line between authenticity and honesty and oversharing and lying?
Yes, there we go. So I think so it's broader than you think, but harder to find than you realize. I think I always think about this kind of in like a first date context, right? Like, you're showing up to a first date and you want to show your best self, but also if your date is vegan and you're not, you don't want to be like, the animals, I'm so vegan, just raised that way, and you also don't want to be like, vegans are terrible, like you are a scourge upon this nation, be gone. So that's one way to think about it. But I think it all comes back to what we were kind of saying at the beginning of the conversation, where you want to think about what's going to be most handy to know for the person in front of you. Like, not thinking about it in a way that like, what's necessarily going to, like, what lie can I tell to impress this person and get this job? But if I were to answer honestly in the context I know this person is looking at me for, because there's certain, decorum things for a job interview. And I trust y'all to know what those are. But I think it is the big sort of separation line is, first of all, you do want to be honest and forthcoming, but you also want to think about who you're talking to, and also what honest answers are going to give you the experience that you want to have. Because if they're like, hey, we work long hours and sometimes we have people come on weekends, is that okay with you? And if it's not, you want to say, no, it is not, but I tend to do my work at a rate where that's not necessary, even at past demanding jobs. So I think that's sort of where the honesty and authenticity line is, not just saying yes, 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 absolutely, and letting yourself get steamrolled. This comes down to, again, knowing your audience who's in front of you, and also, being true to your boundaries and values. If you're clear on those, as we discussed, you don't have to be crystal clear. You just have to know what works for you and what doesn't. But I think that tends to be the line. If you don't want to be lying just to get the job, because that's going to put you in a really terrible situation. Get the job, in my case, get the client. Because I see this too, where we have sales calls and I'll be asked some questions. Back in my copywriting days, especially, that came up a lot. Like, how do you feel about working weekends? And I'd say for a long time, I was like, yep. Like, bring it on, whatever has to be done. I'm a workhorse. Like, half of how I built my business starting so young was I was like, I will outwork every single one of you. And then I died and fried myself, and it was terrible. And I would never recommend that to anybody.